Beyond.
Beyond?
Yeah. Nailed it. Yeah.
That's what we do. That's what we do. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond episode 470-something. I forgot to write it down on the piece of paper. I'm Max Scoville, and I'm joined by Alana Pierce,
Greets.
Brian Altano, and our special guest, Nick Robinson from Polygon.com.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. There's a lot of stuff I should have asked before we started rolling. Like, is this a no cussing show?
If you do a cuss, we have to bleep it with like a cat noise.
Yeah, and that's man hours. Somebody has to go in and manually do
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Anyway, we have a good show lined up. Nick, you played some Gravity Rush 2. You also played some Resident Evil. Alana, you also played Resident Evil. Mass Effect Andromeda. We got some new stuff to go on that. Final Fantasy 7 Remake might be a ways off. What does that mean? I don't know. And also, I played some new things with my VR headset, which made my body upset and my mind feel even worse. Find out what they are. Coming up next. We're not going anywhere. That's actually how we started the show. Anyway,
we needed like a jingle, like dun 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 dun.
It's efficient.
Yeah.
Good.
So Nick, just real quick, who are you?
I'm Nick Robinson. I work for a website called Polygon.com. I make really dumb YouTube videos for youtube.com/Polygon, which is a very distinct brand, I think, from the very serious stuff that goes on the regular website.
Yeah, people like to go, the Polygon, they gave The Last of Us the bad score, but you do the thing where you and, Griffin McElroy mess up things with cars?
Yeah, Griffin put this really eloquently in his Game of the Year video. We play games wrong and bad and don't do a good job of them. So we have a series that is somehow 1,000 episodes long now, where we play this like European crash simulation game called BeamNG.Drive that we have really just broken from the inside out completely. We have a series now called Touch the Skyrim, where I don't like Skyrim, and Griffin's trying to make me like it by adding 15 mods to it every week until it just becomes unrecognizable.
Good God.
So now there's like JoJo Bizarre Adventures powers in it, and we're a skeleton with like glowing eyes, and Tails the fox is following us around as our companion. I'm starting to like Skyrim. It
sounds amazing.
Yeah. It's changing the game.
I did a Let's Play of that with Max, where we just modified the size of all the animals, and there's basically just like 70-foot tall rabbits everywhere. And then we killed one, and he went to take the meat from it, but he took it like right from its taint.
Oh no!
Yeah.
And then we put that video on IGN.com for
Where else
everyone.
do you take the meat from?
That's where there's the most meat.
Well, a rabbit that large, there's enough meat for all of us. Very supple poultry, those little woodland critters.
But can we speak
What?
about how this says special guest Nick Robinson from polygamy.com?
I don't think
What
that's a
the notes
typo.
actually say.
That's the site.
How many wives is too many, Nick?
That's a great question. I feel like as long as it's like in the prime numbers only, it's like a thing.
And what is a prime number?
That's a great
Is
question.
that a number that arrives in 2 days or less with free shipping?
Yeah, you get a free Twitch like subscription with it, I think, every month.
Cool, yeah, fair.
All right.
Thank you.
So Gravity Rush 2 reviews are up for that. I think Polygon gave it a 7.5. That was Whitney who reviewed it.
Yeah, it was. I think
And
that
then
was right.
at IGN, Miranda Sanchez reviewed it and gave it an 8.4. Sounds like it's a pretty good game. The first Gravity Rush was, of course, a Vita exclusive.
Yes.
And then came out as kind of an HD remaster for PS4. This one is just a PS4, and it's you control gravity, and you're like a witch, and you fly around, and there's a cat probably.
Yeah, there is definitely a cat. I can tell you that for sure. I really have scratched this. I played like an hour of it, like this morning, basically.
Did you play the first one at all?
Yes, I played the Vita one for probably like 3 hours. I think I was like on a flight once or something. So I'm like,
that's a terrible game to play on a flight.
Totally. And I'm not like I for that reason I know so little about the story of Gravity Rush that it was very much like kind of throwing me into it and just like I don't necessarily know who anyone is except for Kat and her cat, who's not named Kat. But I got far enough to where you get the gravity powers, and something I was curious about is how they do like the controls, since it's not on a Vita anymore, right? Because that game was like using the touchscreen and like swiping and controlling gravity that way. This one is like interesting because it opens with this extended first-person sequence.
What?
That's really weird, where you're like, there are these two miners. I don't want to talk too specifically about it, but you're like two miners mining some sort of gravity rocks.
You said miners, and I was like 15-year-olds?
They might also be miners, but they're MINERS, and you're like, it's this weird thing where you're looking around in first person through this beautiful spacey gravity rock environment, and then tilting the controller to move your neck.
Huh.
That sounds odd.
I mean, Gravity Rush was tight, I think, because it did cool stuff with the weird Vita features no one else was using, like the touchscreen and the like accelerometer.
Yeah.
And they're doing that with the DualShock 4,
Right.
which is kind of fun. But no, yeah, it feels like more of that game.
Yeah.
Played a fair bit of Gravity Rush 1, and I love the art style
Yeah.
a lot. I think it's a like seriously stunning game, and also the way that it flips is not nauseating at all, which is really surprising with
Yeah.
Totally.
how much it screws with gravity. I played a bit of 2 at E3, and it did seem a lot like the same thing, but I have no complaints about that.
Totally.
It's a really creative game.
And it's
Yeah.
cool seeing that game on like built from the ground up for a system that is not like a handheld, because it's so strikingly pretty. Like all the UI and menu stuff is gorgeous. All the backgrounds are gorgeous. It's like really, really colorful.
It's a really fun combat.
Yeah.
It's also a good time of the year for it. Like I feel like they're not sending this one off to die like they did with like The Last Guardian.
It was delayed, wasn't it? It was meant to
It
come out
was.
last year.
Yeah, which is actually good because it's not directly competing against a ton of stuff right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Aside from some other games coming up soon, which we'll talk about later. But for the most part, like I feel like a lot of Sony exclusives get timed weird. Like they get thrown out there a bunch against a bunch of other things. Last Guardian barely tracked. I don't even think it tracked on the MPD, right? Did anyone see? Yeah, it didn't even crack the top 10. So, yeah, that one kind of got sent out to die after 10 years.
It's a hard month to release, and they totally should have done a January, February thing for that.
Yep,
yeah.
I agree.
Now, one thing Miranda talked about, and you kind of touched on this a second ago, if you don't know the characters or the story of the first one, this doesn't really do you any favors, and it kind of just throws you in there.
For sure. It definitely just kind of starts and assumes you know Kat's history and like how she began and everything. There was also, if I remember right, there was also like some sort of anime short film or movie or something for Gravity Rush that came out at some point, like between now and the first game. So that would probably help me too. But someone who didn't finish the game and hasn't seen that, I'm just a little like...
Yeah, I can't help but feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity because so many people, I mean, if you have a game that launches on a Vita, and even if you do remaster it, like maybe making a sequel that's on a different platform, like kind of Witcher 3 did the same thing with this, where it's like, maybe make sort of an effort to be like, this is on a system that other people... The previous ones weren't on, you know, like there's a good chance that this is your first time in this universe. So maybe
I went to about a month or two ago. I played Nier Automata, and I think the thing I played is probably the same as that demo that's out there now. But something they talked about a lot when I was interviewing the producers on it is like they know that not a ton of people necessarily played the first Nier, and as a result,
Great game though.
Yeah, they built the narrative though so that even if you didn't play it, like you can still kind of like it's a separate protagonist. It's the same universe, but like not. It's not like a direct continuation.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty elegant way to handle it.
Totally.
Even if your game has a number in the title, like it helps.
I think it's important to assume that there's always going to be a significant portion of your audience that have no idea what's going on, who are checking out something for the first time. Even like, I mean, it's tough even for like TV shows to just expect that like this is going to be someone's first episode and it's like season 2, episode 5.
Yeah,
Like,
I totally agree, but at the same time, I feel like there's probably only a very small amount of people actually play Gravity Rush for the story. Like, I really think it's more of a combat-focused game. So
totally.
Yeah, put less of an emphasis on the story. You just got to get those big red apples and get to please that cat.
No, that's Crash
Go get
Bandicoot.
the
Hold the fruits, man.
What did I say? Gravity Crash Bandicoot.
There you go.
I would play the hell out of that.
That would be good.
Now, speaking of
Basically Skylanders.
yeah, speaking of games with numbers in the title, I'm jumping around here a little bit. Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil, Biohazard with a 7
Nailed it.
for the Z.
Heavy 7.
Yeah. You guys both got a chance to play this. There's a preview event back in what, December
Yes.
last year?
Yes.
December 2016.
Back in the
Yes,
day.
correct.
What's up with Resident Evil?
So, based on all the trailers, even the stuff we saw at PSX, I was like, what the hell is this game? It looks kind of like Outlast. It doesn't look like what I know of Resident Evil at all. And I wasn't sold on that. I didn't necessarily think it was a bad thing, but it didn't look like Resident Evil to me. It didn't look like what I wanted it to be. It's totally Resident Evil. So I played 4 hours at an event, and, you know, it has all of the stuff that I love Resident Evil for, like weird, obscure items that work with doors that you hadn't seen when you got the item, and you have no idea how they interact with each other.
You've got to use the Tiffany lamp to open the sliding glass door.
Pretty much. It's actually on my
The
embargo
tiger's
sheet.
glass eye opens the bathroom.
I'm literally not allowed to talk about all the weird keys and stuff that's
really?
under embargo. Yeah, they've just done such a good job of really trying to lock this game down so that nothing is
get it.
spoiled. And there's also like really overpowered weapons, but you still feel helpless, which is something that's really staple Resident Evil to me. You know, you get a pistol and you shoot something in the head 5 times and it doesn't die, and you have to like deal with that ammo conservation. There's still also the item chest, so you have to really manage your inventory. It just chainsaws and shotguns, and none of it makes you feel powerful. So I feel like it's really back to what Resident Evil originally felt like. It is first person, and obviously that's a huge change. I think it works. It's a little bit scarier, I guess. There are
Can you
some-
see your feet?
I didn't check.
God, I can't
Regret.
I was gonna check.
Yeah,
It's also got VR support, right? And
Yeah.
and
it
yes.
does. And
This is probably one of the biggest PSVR. It's probably the biggest PSVR.
Yeah. That's
yeah,
kind of
the longest as well.
Definitely in terms of like hours that of the game that you can play in VR. Like it's not like a Tomb Raider add-on throwaway thing.
Yep.
This is like you can theoretically play the whole game. The impression I got from talking to Capcom folks is like they don't really expect that to be the primary way most people interact with the game.
I would rather die.
Really?
Oh man, it's, you know, even playing it normally, so you're not being chased constantly, but there is a character who is following you kind of through this giant house that just keeps getting bigger and bigger as you go on sometimes. And every time that I would see him or hear him nearby, I would just hide in a corner in the shadows and wait for him to go somewhere else in the house, which is particularly cool because I don't think he was on a loop.
Yeah.
I think that he just walks kind of spontaneously, so you don't really know where he is, which
The
is really
sound
cool.
design is so good on
It
that
is
stuff
really
too.
good.
Like when you hear him, like you hear a door open like 2 rooms away and he's
Yeah.
coming up on you, it's
You
like
can hear
hell the
him.
worst.
Yeah. But he's easy enough to avoid, which is another thing I like, is that when he's kind of following you in a certain part of the game.
What's he like?
I don't even know where to start on that.
Is it a man?
It's a man.
He's a dad.
He's a dad?
Yeah.
He's a dad like
He's in the
spooky dad.
trailers that we've seen.
Okay.
He's a big old hillbilly.
he cusses at you sometimes.
He does.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, he's called me a really bad word that I don't want to make anyone have to spend time bleeping, but it was a combination of swear words that was very creative.
Wow.
He's a very big angry man who, you know, I'm not going to spoil anything, but
Right.
he is in the trailers. We have seen him. He's part of the Baker family.
From like a combination of what I've seen and what I've heard from people who played it sort of behind the scenes, it seems like they're taking a lot of cues from like classic old school horror in the way that like specific segments are like, oh, that's a nod to Psycho, that's a nod to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Like the family specifically that they're using in a lot of the key art is totally that scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre where they all have like weird dinner with that rubber grandpa man.
Totally. And it seems like the way that they're dealing with the family is, it feels like, I don't know this because I didn't get that far, but it seems like they're all kind of tied to certain parts of this ridiculously huge house. So there's like one part is the dad, one part will be the mother, and they all kind of have like different elements sort of, and they're all spaced out. And you just have to like unlock one part to get to the next part of the house. And I think you're looking for someone is why you're there, but there's a huge amount of lore. And I don't know yet if it ties into the previous Resident Evil games, but it definitely has sci-fi elements.
Yeah.
100%.
I totally agree with you that like it is so surprising how much of a real Resident Evil game this is, because at a glance you could totally mistake it for being like a weird departure.
Such a weird choice in
But
the marketing.
once you get into it, it's like, oh, this is like I had a moment in the game that really stood out to me where like there was a bunch of enemies in this room, and in between they were in between me and the place I needed to get, and I had the choice to either craft health with the limited items I had or craft like 10 pistol shots, and I crafted 10 pistol shots and like fought all the enemies, which you could have run past, I guess, theoretically.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
I ran.
Well, what happened was like I killed them all, but at the end of that sequence, I had 1 shot left in my gun, and I was like, that is so cool and doesn't happen in video
And I
games
think
anymore.
that just after that part, there's like a boss fight. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And it totally does feel like Resident Evil 1 and 2, I think more than 4. Also, in terms of scale, it's probably more like 1. But I mean, it's. I loved it, and when I finished playing it, I came back here and spoke to so many people about it, and I'm so excited about it. Like, I hated that I had to stop playing it. It's really good.
I really can't wait for this. I think, Nick, what you just said is really interesting too, about sort of ammo conservation, how games aren't made like that anymore.
Yeah.
Most people nowadays, I think, especially first-person games, you're used to just like kind of standing there and rejuvenating and just coming back to life and being okay, or like hiding behind a wall and being like, everything's safe, or picking up a billion more pistols. So this is kind of awesome. I hope it kind of like kicks a bunch of kids' ass.
I mean, it even has those rooms that you go in and save in. There's like a little cassette tape, and
do they make
it has
that
the
weird spooky music?
Yeah, like it's totally the same as it used to be.
Does it still work weird where like if you put like a sandwich in one of them in one part of the house, like it appears in the other?
Yes.
That made
I think
really?
Because you have a big
Yes.
item storage box, right?
Yes.
And every one of those you go to has all your stuff in it. So you can't teleport sandwiches if you find sandwiches.
Teleport.
Is it weird that like I was hung up on that in the house, that like you needed to use like a shield key to get in to fight a zombie shark, and I'm like, that should be more realistic.
It's that video game thing of like the more they try to ground something in reality, the weirder it seems. Like
Yeah.
when they try to explain away Nathan Drake killing 1,000 people, it's all of a sudden calls attention to it. Or I think the Tomb Raider example is really good, where like when she kills the first dude, it's like really sad, and then every other dude after that doesn't matter.
I think a penny in for a pound. Yeah.
Yeah, because they make you store your stuff in a real, actual concrete box, the physics of that box all of a sudden start being really questionable.
Yeah.
Fine.
But yeah, I didn't think about it much while playing
Yeah,
it.
there's also some cool kind of level up things. You collect these coins. This is not on the sheet. It feels embargoed, but it's not on the sheet. I'm allowed to say it. You collect these coins that you then kind of put in these little bird cages that give you...
Free birds?
No, that would be cool. It's basically different level ups, like increases to your stamina or overall health by
So are
these
they-
coins that you collect. And
Yeah, it's weird because it's like I was wondering for the whole first like 2 hours of the game, like where is the shopkeeper? And then you find like this RV that's full of bird cages, and you've been collecting these coins the whole game. It's like strange
what
coins.
Do they do?
I
Can
think.
I get rid of them?
Yeah, and you don't know what they're for. And then like one of them has like a really nice pistol in it that I could not afford, and then the rest have like hypodermic needles with permanent stat upgrades in them.
That's what it is. Yeah.
And it's like such a just another weird departure of like I was expecting a dude in a trench coat to open his thing and like have all this stuff, but instead of just like no, here's a RV with bird cages with guns.
But there's nobody working in there?
No, it's just you.
Go in there.
So there's no
like a
guy
safe
who's
zone.
like, got some rare things on sale for you, stranger.
No, unfortunately not.
That's
It's all in
odd.
your head.
Yeah, but
God, that's so weird. So what's like, I mean, obviously you're trying to save somebody who was like kidnapped or something, right? But like, other than that, why, like, what is compelling you to stay in this house? Like, can you just go outside and go run in the field and leave?
No.
Like, no?
no.
That sucks.
I mean,
I'm not playing
you
this
can
game.
try.
I'll leave the house.
You can't get out. And
You can't get out.
the one moment where you get the closest to getting out, they stop you. It's so like every time that the game's like, yeah, you're obviously going to try and get out here, a conflict will happen, so you can't leave.
Oh my God.
It's pretty smartly done, but it's also that I don't really want to leave. I'm so interested in the big family that I'm like, I'm going to find out what's going on with all of you weird people.
And I noticed that like for PSVR, there's a bunch of different comfort options. Like you can sort of turn in the kind of pie chart fashion, which we've talked about on the show before, which is sort of like
Where it jumps 45 degrees.
Yeah. Or you can just go full comfort or uncomfort mode and just run around this house. I don't like. I've got my VR legs. I just don't know if this is something I'm ready to do. Like, I love horror movies. I think I'm going to be a big baby.
I played a bunch of horror VR games, and every time I say this, people like speak for yourself. But I really think this is going to be way too scary to play in VR. There was one boss fight that I'm not allowed to talk about, but it was basically in a confined space where I was being followed. And I sort of had to run and then attack and run and attack just in this really small square with a pole in the middle. So I couldn't see the person who was following me all the time. And every time that I died after that, I had to put the controller down and take a breather for like 5-10 minutes because it's not that it was hard or that it was scary. It was just very intense. So therefore I was like, okay, I need to breathe and then pick back up.
Dying in first-person horror is I think what actually gets to me. It's like walking around is one thing, the tension of all that, but when you get killed, it's a different story. Like Max and I play this game called Crystal Rift, which is on PSVR. Not a great game. It's sort of this like cheesy, old school, like PC dungeon crawling adventure game. And I went home and I tried it in VR, and there was this like part where these like just huge saw blades come swinging down, and one of them killed me. And like when you die in that game, it's just this very guttural like, ah!
Yeah.
And then blood, I think.
That's bad sound design.
And yeah, it's just very hokey, but something about it was just like, oh God, like this is getting to me.
I don't think it was the death that bothered me. I think that it was the constant tension.
Yeah.
You didn't have any break from that boss fight. You couldn't escape. You were just stuck in this very small room having to either run or attack constantly. No peace at all. I feel like doing that in VR would just be horrible. Like I think you could play small chunks, but there are some jump scares and just some moments like that
this,
that are
like,
way too intense.
There's this quote that I think about all that because I've never played a horror game in VR, and I will probably die having never played a horror game in VR. Like I just have no interest in ever doing it. I think there was an interview I think on IGN with the makers of Until Dawn talking about the Until Dawn
Blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were talking about Rush of Blood, and there's like a quote from like the dude who is I guess the head of I can't remember the name of that developer right now, but the head of that company saying we think jump scares are great in VR, and I'm just like you and me are just could not be more different people. Like that is I've never disagreed with any sentence out of any human being's mouth more than jump scares are great in VR.
And again, that's one of those games that's like kind of cheesy, kind of hokey, but in VR, it's kind of terrifying.
I
like
mean, it's a totally separate game in VR as well. But I played that
for sure,
at
'cause
Paris
it's on
Games
rails.
Week. Yeah, played it at Paris Games Week, and there's this one moment where you get to the bottom of this hill. And I was like looking around, there was nothing there. And I was like, I know that when I look to the left is going to be the moment where the thing pops out and you get to continue. And they were like, you have to do it. And I was like, I don't want to look to the left. They're like, you cannot proceed without the jump scare. I was like, do you understand why that's ridiculous? Like I figured out that it's there. I've evaded it. So I just closed my eyes, looked, and then kept going. I was like,
it's actually really funny watching somebody play a VR horror game because if you're looking at the TV, like you just see the ceiling and the floor because they're like, ah! They just look away from what they actually should be looking at.
And the thing that I think is the biggest difference between regular horror, because I love horror games so much, I think the difference between playing a game normally and playing it in VR is that you don't have a sense of personal space.
Yeah.
And you really do need a break from that because you can't put your hands in front of your eyes. You don't have the setting of a living room to save you from whatever you're seeing.
You have the buffer of reality between you and the TV. So you can like look left and be like, oh, that's a window that goes outside where people are happy.
And I'm familiar with this environment, whereas when you're in VR, you have no sense of comfort whatsoever. You're in an environment you don't know. It's just so overwhelming. And I would be amazed if well, I'm sure someone will, but how many people will actually manage to finish the full game in VR?
Right.
I'd be really
I
surprised.
read a quote a couple months back from one of the people working on Alien Isolation about how they were kind of like thinking about bringing stuff to VR, even just like in a sort of like compartmentalized version of what the actual game is. And I think like just the simple act of like sitting behind a crate in VR and leaning your head out and waiting for something to kill you, like that's a game. That's already enough to be like, okay, like that stimulates a response inside
I
me.
think Alien Isolation would actually work pretty well in VR because a lot of it is you paying attention to the cues, like, when you see the saliva coming from the ceiling and like the music cues, whereas Resident Evil is a lot of you being chased, which is a totally different feeling. Like, I feel like Alien Isolation would work kind of well. You also get enough breaks.
Yeah.
The Android stuff would suck, though.
Yeah,
Do we know how because I haven't played RE7 in VR yet. Is it still using a controller? Are you still like aiming your gun with a stick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a comfort.
Yeah.
There's
I
actually
guess so.
there's 2 demos out. There's the kitchen demo, which is part of that that demo disc that came with the system, or it's downloadable on the store. And then they launched that new one right at PSX, which is the entire full demo that's been out for Resident Evil 7, but now is completely in VR. And that's a good way to sort of test.
Have you tried that?
Yeah,
How was it in VR?
terrifying.
Yeah.
Does it feel weird? Because I feel like when I'm in VR, if I'm looking in the first person, there's a gun in front of me. My gut, just because having played like so much Oculus and Vive stuff, is I want to be the one aiming that gun.
Right.
And like at a certain point, like the Wii version of Resident Evil 4 had more realistic gun aiming than it sounds like RE7 VR does.
Yeah, and
does that
was
feel
like,
weird?
That was my favorite version for a while of that game, which is probably my favorite Resident Evil game and one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. I just adore that game. Quick shout out to the people making like there's a fan site making like a ultra HD version of that you should check. That's really cool. But in Resident Evil, I found that the tension mostly came from moving around and waiting and hearing, and like it's the scariest parts were not when I was doing something; it was when I wasn't.
No,
Yeah.
it's like the spider rule. If you can't see the spider, it's more scary because it could come out at any moment.
Yeah, totally.
And
Second
I
you're
mean,
looking
like
at it.
with all first-person stuff in VR and PSVR specifically, like one of the hardest things about it is obviously walking and aiming and shooting at the same time. You just run out of inputs. So if you have 2 move controllers or whatever it is, it's just doesn't really get you there. So you end up having to do that like teleport thing, and then so I don't think they're gonna add support for anything like that. I would love that in some way because I'm totally with you. Like walking around is one thing, but the second you have to aim and you're using sticks, like there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see.
Also, that game is kind of gorgeous. Like I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but it totally has that like weird PT vibe of like this looks like somebody scanned in like some 3D telemetry like photos or something of an actual environment. Like you can look at every book on a bookshelf. I saw a book on a bookshelf that just was called Street Fighting.
I love that book.
good.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, it's like a weird.
It is quite pretty.
It's a weird game to be gorgeous because it's hideous.
Right.
Like, and I mean that in the best way possible.
It's
Like,
so hideous.
like when you lift up the lid of a pot and it's like, oh, I wonder what's inside. Is it mealworms? Yes, it is. It's
But
always
the main
mealworms.
game is so much more colorful than the demo as well. Like there's just, I feel like it's
Really?
way more colorful. I feel like that demo is kind of just like a lot of gray and black, whereas the house doesn't actually feel scary. Like I don't think that this is a pure horror game in the kind of way that PT is. It's an action survival horror. It's, it doesn't, you don't feel scared all the time. It's only really when there's a threat present. And, there's a lot of creative stuff in the environment.
Well, this feels more like tangible horror, and PT was more sort of psychological horror,
Yeah,
where you would
that's
loop through and all of a
absolutely
sudden
true.
you'd be like, oh, a poltergeist.
You just never feel comfortable, but
Yeah.
you do sometimes in Resident Evil 7.
Yeah.
What I loved about PT is that it was in like a very familiar setting. Like that house was like a house that your friend lived in. Like
Yeah.
it was a house that you could picture yourself in. What I've seen in Resident Evil is like it's this Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, which is more like, ooh, it's the
It is.
countryside.
Yeah, you're right. It's a huge house.
Just a big nasty house that a bunch of weird people have lived in for a really long time.
that.
Well, like the scariest part in that movie is when Leatherface chases that woman into that one room that like you never really see again. It's just a room,
all
and
the
it's just full of
maze.
bones.
Oh.
Yeah, like she chases him into this room, or he chases her into this room, and she just falls on the floor, and she's like, "What the?" And there's just bones everywhere, and like dead chickens hanging upside down. And then they leave, and you're like,
never
"Wait,
lose
what?"
again.
And like Resident Evil 7 feels like they just built an entire house out of that room. Like it's just gross.
I'm kind of tired of that, Like I'm really sick of like horror stuff that revisits the same tropes, like whether it's a Victorian mental hospital or a graveyard or a forest, or there's always these same kind of horror levels that you see all the time.
Yeah.
And like I think PT really hit the nail on the head with like, oh, this is familiar. Like this is something. This is like a house. This is
I thought PT going away was gonna stop hurting so much eventually, and it doesn't. Every day I'm still
Every day.
sad about it.
It's still like, it's because it was like such a promising thing. It was sort of like, it was like they told you they were going to make a movie out of one of those like trailers that they had during Grindhouse.
Right.
And then they made 3 of them.
My thing is, Silent Hill PT might actually be my favorite game. Like I love it so much, and I've replayed it so many times. Like I just adore it, and I feel like there's no way that Silent Hills could live up to that.
Yeah,
Like I
that's a
figure
big question
if
mark.
it's the last Silent Hill thing that exists, like while I would have loved what Kojima had planned for Hills, like it's great. It's still very good.
You know what you don't hear people talk about that much is the final line of PT. When you beat it and they play the trailer and Norman Reedus shows up and everything, there's a line at the end that says like, this is a teaser not intended to be representative of final gameplay.
Yeah.
And that to me is actually like, that makes me feel slightly less bad about Silent Hills not coming out because I would have wanted it to just be that. Like I would have wanted more of that
That's
weird
how I feel
mind
about
game
it.
stuff.
I think maybe that's just what I'm saying to make myself feel better about it. But
Right.
it's
we're
worked.
we're
So
both
it's fun.
coping.
I like in a perfect world I would have taken a thing like that every year and a half that was just like here's a living room with a table in the middle, and every time you walk around the table more ghosts and dead baby aliens
just
appear.
a 20-minute unbeatable demo every 18
Yeah.
months.
It's full of like secrets and puzzles, and the whole internet's coming together to find. And which is like there's an element of that in Resident Evil 7.
It's absolutely going to be like that. The Reddit is just full of theories of people overthinking stuff.
Yep.
But also when I was at Capcom, they told me that no one has found the fastest way to beat the demo yet.
Really?
So despite this Reddit full of people working
You just
together,
leave the house.
You
Walk
can't.
out the
Front
front
door?
door.
Get out the house.
apparently there's something that no one has found. They wouldn't tell
run
me
out
anything
the
else,
front
but
door,
no one's figured it out yet.
jump
so
out the door.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
I can't wait for this game.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks away.
Very
All right.
excited.
So completely shifting gears here. Mass Effect Andromeda. We got some more gameplay from that at CES. It is a game in space.
It is.
You can do some things. Alana, you screwed around with the collector's edition. What's up with that?
Yeah, so firstly, that gameplay looks beautiful. I think this game's going to be amazing. And we got a release date, March 21st.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is also at the same time that the
And everyone,
collector's
no one
edition is
believes
coming
it.
out.
Everyone thinks it's going to get delayed. Like no, everyone, like
Yeah.
we put up a video about that, and everyone's just like, "Yeah, right." I'm like, "All right."
I feel like they would have delayed it at this point if that were going to be a thing.
You don't
but-
announce that your game's coming out in 2 months unless it's coming out in 2 months.
Yeah.
If it was
Right.
a further away number, there'd be a chance.
Sure.
But like, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really odd. We were at CES the first night, and I was checking out this thing called AirBar, which is basically a device that makes your Mac fully touchscreen. It's super cool. Like pinch and like swipe, all the stuff that you can do on an iPhone or an iPad. And then Brian, my producer, was standing next to me at the time. Was like, Alana, this is the Mass Effect Andromeda Collector's Edition, and I was like, what? And the dude who we were talking to about the AirBar was like, what is this you're so excited about? And I was like, how is that here? And apparently we were the first people to cover it because I guess nobody else at CES cared what it was. And I was just like, how is, oh my God.
Because CES is like 14 consecutive football fields of snake oil and nonsense.
Oh yeah, this wasn't even at the CES show floor. It was like a separate offside.
Dog
it's just
hats.
Such an exhausting
It's like
event.
the dumbest.
It's insane. But yeah, so the collector's edition.
Oh, this was at
collector's edition-
Showstoppers?
It wasn't even at Showstoppers.
Okay.
It was like Showstoppers.
Because that's where we did the interview last year about the video game console for
dogs. That was
yeah.
great. Highlight of my career. But yeah, so first things first, this collector's edition comes with the Nomad ND1, which is kind of like, I think, Andromeda's version of Mako or Mako, the weird jumpy floaty vehicle thing that I love, but people
It's a
hate.
little
whatever.
car for the spaceman.
Fancy little car for the spaceman. And it's fully remote control. Works with your phone, and it has like a camera on the very front so you can take photos or videos, or you can just use regular controls and it's touch. Goes really, really fast.
That's nuts.
It lights up and you can turn the lights on and off from your app. You can also like record anything you want to, and I think you can stream it from the app as well.
You know what that makes me want to
Super
do?
cool.
I feel like we should totally get all of the video game collector's editions that came with vehicles and then race them.
That's a good idea.
Which
That'd be
is
awesome.
the best
Like the Call of
collector's
Duty
edition.
car.
Edition
Yeah.
race.
And we've got that weird Watch Dogs drone thing here, a little robot.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Do you think them putting a Mako or a Mako alike in the collector's edition of this game is them saying like, no, we got it right this time? Like,
I hope so.
You don't put a remote control car in your series that is notorious for bad driving controls unless you super fixed it.
Well, I mean, it worked really well. The actual thing, it was very fast.
So if
it was very
it's
fun.
as good in the game as it was in real life,
10 out of 10,
it'll be-
IGN.
okay.
That's awesome.
But that said, it also comes with the Steelbook. Doesn't come with the game.
Oh,
come on.
Why do they keep doing this?
It's EA. It's EA. Same thing
but
happened
this-
with Battlefield 1.
Well,
It's
then
an
don't,
EA decision.
Don't call it a collector's edition. Call it a collectible. Call it a thing. Call it a product.
Yeah.
Like,
The stuff pack. That's ridiculous.
I know, it's
like
absolutely
all the
insane.
Star Wars toys on my desk aren't the collector's edition of Star Wars. It's just toys that I bought.
Yeah,
Like,
it also comes out on the same day. I think it's $180. I don't remember exactly, but
With no game.
yes, no game. So it is literally a collector's item, a replica of something rather than a collector's edition.
I think that Battlefield guy that looked like Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, that's pretty nice too. This one's
like that
actually from
guy.
PDP. That one was from Triforce, and PDP make good stuff.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's very high quality. I'm super impressed with it, but it
made a car.
was not PewDiePie.
They couldn't
car.
have like just thrown in a little piece of paper, like a fortune cookie sized piece of paper with a code on it to
Gotta
download
be
the game.
an EA thing. It has to be because I mean,
really
for this to happen in
strange.
two separate companies,
Yeah,
it has
yeah.
to be EA being like, no, we want to be the only ones to release this game. I have no idea why. I'd love to find out, but this is, I think, the third time it's happened.
Is that like they can't track NPD on it? Like what is like I don't get the logic
really
of
have no
that.
idea.
It could be to do with if there's no game attached, they don't have to worry about regions. Like
Maybe.
they can ship this thing.
That makes
worldwide
perfect
and
sense.
it's still going to be an RC car that works with your garbage, whatever. But if they include a game for it, that means they have to make separate SKUs for each region. So
Yeah, it's true.
yeah.
But there was a bunch of other cool stuff at CES. I put a note on here, the Sony A1E series. They are bringing out a new TV series that doesn't have speakers because the actual screen itself makes the noise.
Huh.
I don't really know
I have
how
no
this
mouth,
works.
but I must scream.
What?
Well, the display vibrates, so the literal display of the TV acts as a speaker instead of having speakers like on the side.
Oh my god. I feel like you could spend the
Don't
next 3
understand.
years explaining that to me and I'd be like, right, what?
Yeah, it's literally sound is output directly from the display.
That's really odd because TV speakers are notoriously the crappiest speakers in the world.
But it's also, who asked for that?
yeah.
It's so specific.
Yeah, that seems like kind of proving a point. Like that's like they're just like, guess what we can do? Yeah, you're talking about it on your podcast, aren't you?
It works
Yep.
for headlines for sure.
Yeah.
There are also a bunch of cool peripherals.
Did it
couple of-
sound okay? Did you hear it?
I did not hear it because weirdly enough, when I saw it, they didn't have it outputting sound.
What is okay? That has happened. Like this is the 8th time I've heard about something at CES where it was like, "Here's our new VR headset. It doesn't turn on though right now. Check it out." Like
That
I
is-
was
No, it's a snake oil
CS in a
convention.
nutshell.
Like it's like I went to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, and there was one kid in every single class who would come in and be like, "So I don't have any paintings to show you, but what I'm thinking of making is sort of like a hip hop inspired Van Gogh," and we're like, "Make it, like, put it on the
Stop
put it on the
talking about
wall
it.
so we can tell you if it's good or not."
Yeah.
Like,
So that's a good segue right there. All right. So Final Fantasy VII Remake and Kingdom Hearts 3, according to Tetsuya Nomura, are still a ways off. That good old vague thing. These are two games that got shown off. When were these first shown? This was
Final Fantasy VII was E3 2014.
2014
Was it?
or 15?
15.
15, and then Kingdom
15,
Hearts.
yeah,
Kingdom
15.
Hearts was 14, right?
Yes.
And that was also the same one where we got Scalebound revealed. Was that?
Yeah. Well,
And
Nick,
that's-
you just put up that tweet yesterday,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah, that was a weird E3. The Scalebound cancellation got me looking back at what everybody put out that E3
Right.
just to see, because Microsoft's E3 2014 in hindsight is really, really weird now. Scalebound was a game they announced there that just got canceled. Phantom Dust, that version of Phantom Dust got canceled. They're still doing like the re-release of it, but the remake from scratch, that's canceled.
Fable Legends?
Fable Legends wasn't announced there, but it was the first time they showed gameplay was at E3, so it had a huge stage presence, also canceled. Project Spark didn't get canceled, it got released and then unreleased. You can't buy that game anymore.
Really?
Right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
So
sounds great.
And then I went and looked at like Sony's E3 lineup that year and Nintendo's, and while like not every Nintendo game from E3 2014 or Sony game from that year was great, they all for the most part
Came
came
out.
out or didn't get canceled,
Okay.
except for like I think Dead Island 2 was on stage at Sony for a little bit, but that's not a Sony game, so I don't think that really.
That
And also
trailer.
that game is like I think they just shift to another development team. It's not
Yeah.
like canceled. Anyways, that was a weird year in hindsight.
Well, was that the year that Xbox One was announced, or was that the year before?
Year before.
2013? They announced it?
Yeah.
Year before, yeah, 2013.
Because
was the-
they had so much making up to do after that I'm not surprised their next E3 was just a mess.
Well, I liked your follow-up tweet, which is sort of who was it tweeted that picture of the mic drop?
Xbox, the
Yeah.
at Xbox Twitter account at the end of their E3 2014 press conference tweeted a microphone that had been dropped and was like really looking forward to like all these great games coming.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
like, oh, yeah.
I mean,
Well,
and
I
then you look at
don't want to turn this into like a console war
no,
thing.
of course, but
totally.
like to talk about the Sony, the like
Sony
Sony
does
the
it
next
too.
year they
Yeah.
had The Last Guardian, which is now out. They had Final Fantasy VII and they had Shenmue, which are both sort of in
Yeah.
up in the air. That was their
Yeah.
big three that year.
Yeah, and what else they have? They also had this last year. Was it? No, this last year they had Final Fantasy
Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo. They got a
They
bunch
had
of stuff
Crash.
they
Crash.
showed off a bunch of stuff that they're teasing it, and I feel like we're at this point where maybe it's just bad to tease stuff before it's closer.
I mean, I still feel like the Last Guardian was a near miss. there is a universe that is not that many universes adjacent to ours where that game never came out.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that
Right.
could have been their scale bound if things had been handled
Totally.
slightly differently.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to imagine, and I've said this on the show before, but that was a suicide mission by the end of that game's release, because there was literally no way in any capacity that game would have ever recuperated its costs for development after 9 something years of being in development hell. And the fact that they like my problem with that game was that they sent it out to die like in early December early December, right?
Yeah.
And like of all the times, and they could have at
Well,
least recouped a little bit.
I would guess it's because coming off of the 10 years of people being familiar with the name, they just assumed that everyone would want it enough.
Yeah.
But, you know, people who just play FIFA and Call of Duty don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's also your Christmas money is all spent by that week anyway.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, I mean,
Strange choice.
it brings back that age-old question, like, do you want to find out about games like 2 months before they're out, or would you like to know that someone's making something for a
It's
long
one
time?
of the things that makes our industry the most different from like movies, right?
Yeah.
Like as soon as a movie starts production, everyone in that industry knows about it.
Yeah.
For the most, unless it's like some secret Star Wars or J.J. Abrams like hidden Cloverfield
Yeah.
project.
Or the Uncharted movie.
right.
It's a video
the
game
second
movie.
it's-
It's like development hell forever.
It's like the second it's greenlit. Like there'll be scripts
Yeah.
floating around, but the
Yeah.
second it's like in pre-production, people are like, "Oh, this is happening," and then
Yeah.
pre-production can fall into hell. But like, yeah, I mean, but
Like I think like with movies, they're never like Mark Wahlberg kept getting stuck in the wall, so we had to like
so they call him.
We pushed it
Wahlberg.
back 18 months.
we had to buy a new camera.
Call him Mark Wahlberg.
So yeah, back to Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy 7. Like these are games that don't need like it's not the Last Guardian where you're like, what is that? Oh, it's the guys who did this other 2 games you might have played in 2005. These are games that obviously have a lot of like weight to them, and apparently there's still more waiting to happen. Kingdom Hearts 3 that was 2014 that they showed that off. Nomura said, the production process is different than what we've had up until now, so I can't just give you a general idea, but I can say there are worlds that remain untouched. We've advanced in the production of worlds that have yet to be announced, so we can't show them for now. As far as development status goes, there's still a ways to go. So maybe, why did you show it to us in 2014?
I mean, it's possible they started making this game before like Star Wars was a really big thing, and if they're delaying it
true,
for
yeah.
Star Wars, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't want that one bit.
Really?
So I got in a big fight with the Kingdom Hearts community.
No.
Yeah. I said that Kingdom Hearts is like pineapple on pizza, and that it's 2 things that are great on their own, but if you put them together, you are wrong and bad, or something to that effect. Which
Yep.
a lot of people would pick up on as being hyperbolic, and not,
and
not a serious. I
Like
don't-
pineapple on pizza, there are a lot of people who love it and will die for it and will go to bat for it and will yell at you about it.
Yeah.
So it's that metaphor works even
Though they're fundamentally wrong and gross.
Right. I just don't like. I like
Bring it.
Disney. I like Disney stuff, and I like Square Enix stuff. I just think combining the two is just odd to me.
Yeah.
It's this kind of East meets West thing.
No, I think that's something that I like about it, is how weird it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never played a Kingdom Hearts, but I just have,
Square
from a
Enix is-
distance, I love that it's just so the idea that like Goofy or Donald Duck will have like a dramatic death scene or something
Yeah.
is so funny to me inherently.
Nick,
that
I'm actually legit surprised you haven't played any of those games. 'cause
No, I'm
I
not
feel
a-
like they'd be your jam.
It's funny. I don't really play JRPGs. I've never really played a Final Fantasy game. I think I played like Tactics Advance on the school bus once. Like I did the snowball fight tutorial, and that
Yep.
was it. But I've never really touched that, like the Square Enix world. I am excited for the Final Fantasy 7 remake because it's CyberConnect 2,
Yeah.
who made Ashura's Wrath, which is like the best
yeah.
game ever.
Played
But
that.
that's kind of the
I
extent
remember
of my love for that stuff.
See, I like the idea of like them folding Star Wars into this. First of all, we don't get enough Star Wars video games. Second of all, like I don't know, like if you go to Disney, you can see the Millennium Falcon with Mickey standing in front of it.
I don't
Sort
like
of.
that so much.
It's weird. It's odd. Like they have that
So-
Donald Duck Boba Fett crossover
Yeah, I
crap
don't
that
like
they sell in
that
the
one
store.
bit.
There's something really funny and
love
quirky
it.
and weird about
It
that.
is.
weird.
I like the
Yeah.
weirdness. And the thing for me is that Kingdom Hearts is so happy.
Yeah.
I mean, some pretty messed up stuff happens, but I feel like it's just a really happy universe. And if you can put Star Wars, which is something that I like, into that already happy, like goofy, cartoony universe, I'm
Yeah,
cool
like
with it.
Max, you didn't have a problem with Disney Infinity.
No, that's because it had a consistent style guide.
Well, yeah.
It had one like cohesive kind of
That's-
aesthetic.
Yeah.
And
That
that's
is
what
true.
really
Like,
gets
how
me. Like,
does-
if they had classic Disney characters that are redesigned to look like Final Fantasy characters, I'd be so down with that. But the fact that they look like regular Disney characters
Just
that happen to be wearing Final Fantasy
Duck,
armor,
no
I'm just
pants.
like, no, thank you. I don't
Like
that.
how
Mickey
is it?
Mouse with spiky hair.
Yeah.
How is like Sora? Like how is a Kingdom Hearts human gonna look standing next to a Star Wars human? Because those are 2 very different types of human.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
drastically different looking.
Make them look like rebels, right?
Maybe.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway,
easy way.
before
It's weird.
I anger the pineapple pizza crowd, Final Fantasy VII Nomura said, we're making steady progress on its production while we are indeed working on it. I think we'll have you guys wait a little longer for both Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake. So I'm like, I think about 30 something hours and 25 hours into Final Fantasy 15, and I'm in love with it. I think it's my game of the year. I never finished a Final Fantasy game. I dabbled in them when I was younger. It's funny because you can pick up the soundtracks to classic Final Fantasy games in this, and I'd be in the corner of my best friend's room, like drawing or playing like Game Boy or Virtual Boy or whatever, while he was playing FF6 or 7 or 5 or whatever. And so like those soundtracks are like very deeply rooted in my childhood. And like I remember like caring about the characters and like watching certain sequences, but never actually being like fully engulfed in the game itself. So to play this and jump fully into it and be like, I am really enjoying this game. It's fantastic. The fact that it says a Final Fantasy for fans and first timers is, I think, totally true. And it's got me being like, hey, I'd be super down to play Final Fantasy VII with this control scheme and this level of exploration.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, when's that going to happen? Is that going to come up real soon? They built this whole engine. They got it running. They got a combat system that works pretty well. It seems to work well with big swords.
Keep in mind, Final Fantasy 15's first iteration was announced like before any of us were born.
Right.
Like, that game was in development for 100,000
That was
years.
actually developed coinciding with Final Fantasy II.
They were simultaneous development on this project.
Mark Wahlberg kept getting stuck in the wall.
Yeah. It sucks they had to patch him out of that game.
I just downloaded it and just got through the tutorial, and we have a 3-day weekend coming up, and I'm really excited to start playing.
I adore it. I played like 8 hours straight the other day. It's a great game.
Yeah.
Are y'all Final Fantasy fans at all?
Not really. I'm kind of like Max in that I grew up with the Super Nintendo ones and the a little bit of the NES ones. I wasn't super into the NES ones, but like Final Fantasy 2/4 on Super Nintendo is one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And then I tried getting into like the later 3D ones after like 6 and 7 and 8, and just wasn't too crazy about them. Yeah. They felt just really weird and obtuse. And then like when they went into like MMO territory, I was like, I'm out. But the same way as Max, like I had like friends who I would go over to their houses and they would just be playing for hours, and I just sort of consumed it vicariously through them. But then this one came around, and I'm like, oh, for first timers, well, that's kind of me again. And I saw the whole like buddy trip, Zoolander fight dinosaur angle of it, and I'm like, this is really cool. I love cooking, and the food looks awesome in the game.
Makes me hungry all the time.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to jump in and just like kind of like Max. I don't know. Max is my best friend, and he just knows what I like. And hearing him talk about this game, me kind of being like, oh, you know what? Like I think I would get into that. Like Max kind of sold me better than any trailers did or anybody else did.
That's kind of why I
really
asked.
sweet.
And are you a Final Fantasy fan at all?
I played 6, 7, 8, and 9. 8 was actually the same for me, where my dad was living with someone, and his son was playing 8 in front of me, but he never let me touch it. So I experienced that game without playing it myself, and I had no idea what it was until I played it way later, and I was like, this is that game from my childhood that kid wouldn't let me touch. But I only finished 9, and I love 9. The rest, I'm like, I don't like them so much, but
okay.
I mean, 6 is a really good game.
This conversation, I'm having a similar reaction to you, Brian, which is that this conversation is making me want to. This is the first out of all the talking I've heard about Final Fantasy 15. The fact that you have never finished one and you're enjoying this makes me want to try it.
Yeah.
The 4 homies in cars riding around, just like
exactly
bantering. That is my shit. Like that vibe is amazing. That's
exactly
what
it
I
is.
want to go to.
100%.
Like I'll warn you as somebody who's like very far removed from this that the tutorial kind of turned me off, and there's a certain point where you can just leave it, which is nice, because kind of jumping in, I was like, this is not for first timers. This is for people who love this crap. And then little by little, I was like, you know what, just power through it.
The tutorial is really bad.
You can also skip the tutorial and just sort of pick it up later.
You will pick it up. Yeah. Tutorial's not great.
So I'm just like really happy about that, and I can't wait to play. Can't wait to play 7 whenever that happens.
I'm not
play it with my kids someday.
I'm not
It's
super
exciting.
bothered by either of these delays. I feel the same way about delays every time, where it's like I want a good game, so delay it if you need to. But yeah, I think it's very odd that they debuted them when they did.
I also think like Square delays are like it would be weird if these games didn't get pushed back 1,000 times, right? Like if Final Fantasy 7 just came out like this year somehow, that remake, it would be like something.
Well, I feel the same way like when Reggie gets on stage and he's like, in 2015 you'll be playing Legend of Zelda. I'm like, no, I won't. Stop lying. Like it's fine.
Well,
we have this relationship now. I don't believe you, but I'll give you money eventually.
We're at a point where the kind of the hype train is part of the experience. And expectations weigh so heavily on games when they're announced and when they come out. And like we saw this with like with comparing like say Fallout 4 with Watch Dogs 1, like the fact that they're like, it's out this fall, you can go get it, and you're like, oh, whoa, I didn't, cool, we'll do that. And, you know, it wasn't like a lot of like, you know, conspiracy theory and disappointment ahead of time.
You didn't have time to get mad that anyone downgraded it or anything. It was like, I just found out. It's like that Louis C.K. bit about being on a plane that has Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi goes out, and you're like, I can't be angry about something I didn't know existed a few minutes ago.
Well, that's weird. The light's going on and off. Anyway,
It's PT.
Yeah, I thought that was like a 5-minute warning or
yeah, I
something.
don't know. It could be. It's like trying to talk to us.
The weird elephant in the room with this thing is that it's a the Final Fantasy VII is going to be broken into chunks, and you won't be able to play it all in one sitting. Like you said, you're 25 hours into
no idea how that's
15. Like, I don't know if you'll be able to do that with 7. I mean, maybe if you grind in certain areas, and
are different developers handling different portions? Isn't that part of it too?
Could be.
CyberConnect 2 is doing the first
I
bit.
think you are right about that, but I also think it's a terrible idea. Like, Hitman is a really, really good game, but just didn't get any attention when it came out this year because it was episodic, I think.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, wait until all the episodes came out. And then they were like, I've got all this stuff to play now. It's too late.
I think
story-wise, like Final Fantasy games are long as hell.
Yeah.
You know, you can have like part 1, and it's, you know, I mean, Lord of the Rings is one story. You know, and it broken into 3 pieces. People are like, whatever, you know.
I think publishers are still struggling with that idea of like how to keep a game in your vernacular for a long time, and how to keep you from trading it in. And do you add multiplayer? Do you add like special segmented missions that come later? Single player DLC? Like, how do you get someone to talk about a video game for a year and a half? Usually something like you work on something for 10 years. We talk about it for 5 days, and then we never mention it again. Like I spent the first month of 2016 gushing about how much fun Far Cry Primal was, and then I never talked about that game again because they stopped supporting it. And I think if they had thrown out some DLC in the fall, Game of the Year talk would have come around. I would have been like, Far Cry Primal was a great time.
Yeah.
Hitman is maybe the closest I think anyone's gotten to getting it right, because I feel like I did legitimately hear people talk about Hitman all year round. But it is like, it's so true what you're saying about episodic games giving you an excuse to wait till all the episodes are out. I think every single person I know has been telling themselves for the past 4 years that they're going to play Kentucky Route Zero someday once that last one comes out, but nobody's actually touched it. Like, obviously some people have, but for the most part, I think it's easy to just be like, I'll get around to it later.
It's convenient.
This Final Fantasy VII remake could. What would be weird to me is what if every episode of Hitman was by a different developer, like using a different engine and everything was different. That would be a way different situation.
I kind of like that. I mean, if your progress would carry over in some bizarre way, that's kind of awesome.
I know we already mentioned Grindhouse like once today, but like that's almost a Grindhouse approach to
or like
game
4
anthology
rooms
approach.
Yeah,
I like that. All right, so it's time for What VR Playing, the VR segment of the show. I have a virtual reality hat that I like to put on and go to different places. And I've been playing catch up on the virtual reality world.
Is catch up a new game?
No, catch up is where you're the bus is leaving without you, and
you're a burger and people just dump condiments.
So it's not a condiment thing. It's about buses. Like,
I went with condiments.
I totally thought it was going to be a ketchup
I was just thinking like you're an actual first person burger and people dump mustard and ketchup on you.
I'm kind of a first person burger. Anyway, I checked out this game called World War Toons, which is free on PSN. It's in beta. I think you can play it without VR. It's a first person shooter that is World War II setting, but everything is very cartoony and very like Looney Tunes style, very like Who Framed Roger Rabbit kind of thing. The explosions are all like kind of hand drawn. It's like really charming, and the VR support is awesome. It has the option to do either the kind of the pie chart turning, which is not good for a competitive online first person shooter.
Right.
I was like, I'll try the vomit mode and see if that works. I think it's like there's like VR comfort mode, and then there's screw it mode, and I tried that one. And I got used to it really easily, and I was thinking about it, and I think it's because it is so cartoony, and it's not like, you're not like, this isn't reality. Your brain's just kind of like, yeah, man, those are pianos falling from the sky.
You say that, but I played Minecraft in VR in the non-comfort mode and nearly threw up in like 10 minutes.
Were you tired?
Was I tired?
Yeah. A weird question.
Just in general? Yeah, always.
Okay, well, that's actually an issue with VR.
Is it really?
Yeah, if you're not well rested, it's way tougher to adjust.
I
with
don't
stuff
remember
like that.
being tired, but I know that I got really, really hot and wanted to throw up.
That intuitively makes sense to me, but I can absolutely corroborate the fact that Minecraft in VR made me want to die.
Yeah.
Unless you play it in the pie chart.
No VR game has made me as sweaty as that, except for maybe Thumper, and that's more like a good sweat.
Yeah.
But the Minecraft VR sweat that I got was just like, I feel bad.
Yes.
Like meat sweat?
Anytime well, you know what it was? It was anytime I moved in Minecraft in VR. I was like, if I move my analog stick at all, I am not having
Your
fun.
body totally heats up. I had to keep taking it off.
But it wasn't this way with this.
This wasn't. No, this is. I've played a lot of VR games. I played like the piloting stuff where you're spinning upside down, and it's kind of odd that you do like the piloting stuff, which is your complete like. I don't even know what you call it when it's 360 and it's a full range of movement. You can turn upside down, and that's like something I can't do while I'm sitting in my chair. But
barrel roll?
Yeah, barrel rolls. That's what you call it. 360 barrel rolls. But in this one, like you run around and you basically it's normal twin stick movement, but for fine aiming, you're using your eyes. So like to shoot a guy, you're looking at him. One thing that's really funny is if you pick the sniper class and you zoom in with the sniper rifle, the scope doesn't actually magnify anything because I think that would be even more disorienting. What it does is it magnifies people's heads. So like it makes everyone go into big head mode so they're easier to hit.
Cool. I kind of love that.
And then in order to get like a proper headshot that like is taking somebody out, you basically have to charge up your shot. It's really fun. I think people should go check it out. It reminds me of like Worms a bit. And it also recalibrates every time you die, so it doesn't have that like VR drift stuff going on.
And like you said, it's free, right?
Yeah, it's free.
That's
So,
awesome.
give it a shot.
I'm currently without a PlayStation VR in my life right now. I had the Office one that we were sent by Sony during launch, and then I gave it to a coworker to like try Bound in VR. And I forgot I had pre-ordered it, so I have like the box that doesn't come with the camera. It's been sitting in the corner of my room for 4 months, and I've been doing this like mental dance of like, okay, I really want to do the Res Area X stuff.
Yeah.
Like I finally unlocked it. I have not played it yet, and I'm like, there's still a part of me that's like, I can return my PSVR. It hasn't been opened. Is it worth opening this for Res Infinite's Area X?
Sure.
For that alone? Because I think I'm in a weird position now. Like at launch, when you buy a PSVR, you're like, okay, because I got all this stuff. I've got Thumper and Res, and then maybe games in the future. Now that we're like a few months into PSVR's launch, can you name, like, other than Resident Evil, like, what's an upcoming PSVR game? I'm kind of stumped trying to think of one.
Well, that's where it gets a little weird because I mean Resident Evil's a big one, but the I was looking at like the drop and there's nothing this week, which is like the first time in a while there hasn't been anything. But there's a bunch of like little things happening here and there. Like I've been saying on the show for a while that PSVR hasn't really had a bunch of Mario 64s, but it's had like a dozen Pilot Wings. You know, like it's kind of a weird launch where you're like, all right, well there's a few like C+, B- games, but there haven't been a ton of like A+ games. But
yeah, and I think a lot of the things that are coming out are from indie devs who don't have huge marketing budgets. So there are still things coming out, and a lot of them are creative and unexpected and weird. It's just that you don't know about them because they don't have the money to tell you about
they just
them.
kind of appear on the store.
Yeah, which I kind of like.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
What's here this week?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Like I had never heard of World War Tunes until this conversation, so that gives me something to go home and check out. I guess I also feel pretty confident because like PSVR, my understanding is that it wildly outsold the Vive and Oculus.
It did,
like by landslides, and that is kind of the biggest hurdle in VR is like where's the user base? The user base is in PSVR, so I do think that games will get there eventually. I just wish I had like one thing on the horizon to look forward to, because then I could open this box and not feel guilty about
Werewolves
wasting
Within
money.
just came out. That's an awesome game.
Yeah.
I reviewed it. Werewolves Within.
Oh yeah.
Which is basically
Eagle Flight's really cool too.
I think I watched y'all play.
You
that,
didn't like
actually.
Eagle
I
Flight?
hate Eagle.
What?
I hate it so much.
Why?
Sound design, man.
You don't like those scraws or those eagles?
Oh, that game. The way I describe that game is it goes bump, 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 scrawl, and that's the entire game the whole time.
Is there a separate
what's
volume
wrong with
meter
that?
for the eagle itself in the
hate it
settings?
so
Because
much.
that would help.
I wish that every video game had like an animal sound level
Specific.
that you could
I need to
turn
get
I like
up.
to play with bears
so
all the way
bad.
up and every other animal down. It makes Assassin's Creed 3 very weird.
Yep.
So one other game I jumped on was Surgeon Simulator Experience Reality. Surgeon Simulator is a game that I really, really want to love. It is a game where you do surgery, but it's like bad, goofy surgery, and the controls are sort of kind of inherently wonky.
It was kind of one of the first like it's broken on purpose kind of
it's
games.
very much that kind of like Class of Goat Simulator kind of thing.
Yeah.
This one, like I've played the first mission of Surgeon Simulator, which is like a heart transplant. I've done it a few times. I'm like, maybe VR is the way to do it. It's still going to be goofy, but having like, one-to-one controls with PlayStation Move controllers maybe makes it better. I don't know if my setup isn't right and I need to get the lighting better or recalibrate or whatever, but it's even worse than it was before. It doesn't really tell you whether you should play it sitting down or standing up. Like usually VR games are really good about that. They're like, clear space, make sure you got plenty of room to move around. I'm like,
Most surgeries are done completely sitting down. Just
and I
real
was
relaxed.
like, do I squat? Like, and I'm trying to, get the camera right. And I'm just, the first time I got the rib cage off and I pulled out the lungs and the guy's not dead yet. Like I murdered him numerous times and I got the heart out and I was about to take it out. I did very carefully, and everything's just wiggling. Like everything's not quite, there yet.
Yeah.
And I pull the heart out and it does this insane, elastic slingshot thing where it just bounces all over the screen and I'm holding on to it. So it's just this weird, paddle ball effect. And then it just flies off in the corner of the room and it's like, you murdered this man. And I was like, all right, whatever. And I finally got it. And then I couldn't get to the, I couldn't figure out how to get to the next mission, and I was like, what am I doing?
I think like I would say that's a PSVR thing, but I've actually had that happen with the base version of that game on PlayStation, where it's just it doesn't coordinate with me, it doesn't communicate with me well. I've also had weird times where like I'm playing PSVR on like a Sunday afternoon and the sun from San Francisco is coming in and like a light beam bounces off a picture frame in the corner and all of a sudden like everything is jittering around like crazy.
Yeah, my experience playing Job Simulator in PSVR sounds a lot like your experience playing Surgeon Simulator in VR, because I just would like, part of it was like I would reach down onto the ground to grab an object that was there, and it just immediately would like lose hand tracking. And it feels like there's like it's really easy to blame yourself for that stuff. I heard, because you said like maybe my PSVR setup's not right. I've never met anyone whose PSVR setup is right who isn't a Sony employee who like has it set up in a nice dark booth at E3 or something.
The Move controllers are really old.
That's true.
It's old technology, and you know, especially compared to Oculus Touch, which is just incredible. I think that there's no way that Sony aren't coming out with a replacement for Move controls.
I think it's baffling that they launched that thing without updating those controllers from 2010 or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that and the no HDR pass-through for 4K TVs was completely baffling to me, that when I want to play PSVR, which is already a pretty cumbersome experience of like dragging out this big helmet, taking out the Move controllers, making sure they're charged, like wiping down the lenses and stuff like that, pulling out the 70-foot Anaconda that it's connected to, and then like unplugging the HDMI and plugging it in. Like it's just so like when I go back to my PSVR or my PS4 a few minutes later to play like something in 4K HDR, it's not blocking that signal. So there's a couple of like just weird decisions with that thing. I really, really love it. It's like the most comfortable VR kit I've ever tried.
Totally.
But
Absolutely.
it's definitely got some hiccups.
I think we'll see some fixes for that kind of stuff in E3.
I like my hat, and I'm excited to have more hat experiences in virtual reality. Real quick, we got time for a couple quick questions from Rapid Fire, which is, of course, when we go in the Podcast Beyond Facebook group, which is facebook.com/group/podcastbeyond, and ask you for questions. I put up a picture of Nick with you with the bongo drums, the donkey bongos or whatever they're called.
Donkey bongs, yeah.
Donkey Bong Conga.
Yeah, I don't know what they're called. Go Conga Go or whatever.
Congy Dong Bunko Beat.
Anyway, Conky Sam Squanch, I'm not having a stroke, that's his name, said, how do you deal with NDA and holding in secrets? Do you all tell each other?
NDAs, obviously non-disclosure agreements.
The answer is that if we were to say yes, then we would be fired.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's under NDA.
I always talk about it like it's that stupid story about like the golden goose that lays eggs, and you can get an egg every single day if you take care of it. But like there's that guy that comes in and it's just like, kill the goose and get all the eggs out of it. It's like, no, it'll give you something every day forever. Like our relationship with publishers and each other is that we learn secrets, we keep them close to our chest, so that when they're making Resident Evil 8 and 9, they come to us again and they're like, we can trust those people.
I also want to say that I think a lot of, like, there would be things that I would know under NDA that you guys would not know. In that, like, they don't tell everyone. Like, we don't just have a publisher come and be like, everyone in IGN, here is this. Like, it's very individual.
Yeah, we don't really get, like, I think like the last time I remember just like 20 of us getting in the room and getting briefed on something was the Minecraft story mode from Telltale.
That was weird. That was
came
unusual.
In. It was very unusual. Yeah. They came in. We have a big theater here at IGN, and they just came in and just sort of like showed us everything.
And it was because we weren't covering Minecon or something.
Yeah,
it was like they were going to be announcing it there. But yeah, like as far as like working at different outlets, like there is. I know there's a group for reviewers that when I was reviewing games, it was basically like it was like a top secret cabal of like people who needed help, you know. And
I'm on that Facebook group.
And it's you know, it's useful because reaching out to the PR person when they're just like, they're not, you know, they're going to have to go to the devs and be like, how do they get through this? Whereas being like, hey, you know, Arthur Geese, how do I make this man jump higher? And he's like, you push the button better.
Yeah,
idiot.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people think groups like that are about like conspiring industry secrets. No. It's mostly like we get stuck in a game pre-release and there's no guide, there's no help, there's no subreddit yet.
Right.
I was on that Facebook group for Chronos, which is an Oculus exclusive game that came out earlier this year. Last year, I guess now. And I absolutely love that game, but there was so many things where I got stuck and it was just infuriating, and there were other people getting stuck, and it was just a comment thread of people talking about the exact same things that they were stuck at. No conspiracies.
The Witness was a big game for that last year.
Totally.
Like we didn't have anyone else to talk to about that except for each other, and it was very helpful because that game kind of needs it. I think the interesting part of this question to me is like, is holding in secrets hard. I don't find that that's the case. Maybe it's because I've like a few years into this. I guess like I very rarely know anything that juicy.
Exactly.
I'm not like holding in a secret. I'm holding in like an hour-long gameplay video.
Right.
Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not supposed to name that one boss fight that I had or whatever.
I mean, yeah, this list of things here. I mean, I really want to talk about all the Resident Evil spoilers,
see
but I
that?
can't. Well, we don't want anyone.
Oh, that's a secret. I didn't know
Several
that. I
secrets.
shouldn't have known that one bit.
But I mean,
There's a large egg.
yeah.
you just avoid talking about it. For the most part.
Ooh,
Yeah.
people are gonna be mad about that.
I think like
I gotta read that
tough part is like, I don't know, as a kid I loved getting video games for Christmas, and I don't get them anymore because now we have them at work and I get them, you know, I get codes and stuff like that. So that part's gone. But it's also like the idea of watching E3 and having no idea what's going to happen doesn't really happen to us anymore. So like
I try to avoid knowing anything going into E3.
Oh, really?
If I can, because I
Yeah.
still like being excited. That's something I've been doing, like watching E3 since I was 10 and getting excited about announcements, and I try and keep that as much as I can. Like,
Yeah.
I've definitely had the thing happen where like someone has come back from some sort of pre-briefing for like an E3 related announcement, and I'm like, I don't want to hear that actually. I just want to watch the thing tomorrow. And so likewise, I remember like when we were in the sort of heat of like the Smash Brothers announcements. Like I love Smash Brothers so much, and I love Nintendo so much, and I was like, there was a part of the back of my head that was like, I kind of hope nothing else leaks. Like I kind of hope someone doesn't like do a dump of the 3DS ROM and find every single character's name in it. But then of course it inevitably happened.
Yeah, I hate leaks. Publishers hate leaks. There are some fans that love them, but I would rather the messaging be controlled by the artists and developers responsible for it. Like I love surprises too. With Smash Brothers, I was the same way. I was like finding out about Pac-Man from Sakurai at E3 in that room was awesome. And that wouldn't have happened if somebody had just taken like a cell phone picture.
Yeah.
It's so weird because it is there's that blurriness between like being a fan and being a critic, but I can't think of anything I enjoy more than like watching one of Sakurai's pre-rendered trailers and not knowing who the character is, and then it's like someone weird like Wii Fit trainer. Like that is my favorite feeling.
Yeah,
on earth.
it's so cool.
Hopefully get some of that this week.
Yeah, I think that the difference between like NDAs and holding in secrets is that one is a very pretty boilerplate like legal agreement that's like, hey, just shut up until this date. Embargo stuff is usually, for the most part, by the time it gets to us, you're gonna hear about it in a week and a half anyway. Like it's not really that exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally something has like floated in my ear that's something that I probably should have known about, and I'm like, wowzers. And then it's sort of like a little bit scary. Like I'm afraid I'm gonna like get put under anesthesia or something and come out and be like,
start a Periscope.
They're mocapping Brad Pitt for Destiny 5 or something.
I
I'm
have
like,
had things where I'm like, I forget sometimes if something is rumored or I just heard the thing. So I'm like, I'm just not going to comment because I don't remember if this is like a rumor that I read or if this is actually true. And I just like forgot about it. I'm just going to avoid that.
Have any of y'all ever accidentally like broken a major embargo on like a live video or something?
I don't think so.
No, that's tough though, because if I get pre-briefed on something and then I'm like hosting a pre-show and it's kind of like, what do we expect from this event? And I'm like, I know a bunch of stuff already. That gets very difficult, but I actually prefer that because then I can sort of be a little more measured.
Conversation. As
Yeah. And I don't have to spend 20 minutes being like, Sonic the Hedgehog is in Horizon Zero Dawn. Maybe. I'm like, I know he's not. Or I know he is. He is.
Kevin Adderidge?
Yeah, that was it. That's how that word works.
Adderidge. Okay. Nick talked about how he wanted Hello Games to drop No Man's Sky and return to smaller games like Joe Danger. Are there any other developers who you'd like to see do the same? Rockstar with Max Payne. As always, thanks. And then 2 different types of hearts, which I thought was very nice.
creative. Love hearts.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
I like that Rockstar comparison. I started playing Bully over the holiday break because it's on iPhone now, and I was on a long flight. And like that's an open world game, sort of, but it's like so much smaller. And I felt the same way with stuff like Max Payne, State of Emergency, Manhunt. Like these are games that were very definitive, like beginning, middle, and end. And I think that like you could get a game like that every 2 or 3 years instead of every 6 or 7.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that about Rockstar because GTA is so good.
Yeah.
And it's like what they're making is so amazing that I would never want to pull them back. But at the same time, it would be cool to have like more Rockstar studios because like I loved Max Payne 3. I loved 1 and 2 as well, but 3 was a really, really good game, really well paced. So
I think I would want another Max Payne, but I would want it from Remedy.
Yeah,
I want Remedy to make one again because I
don't
actually
see that happening.
I reinstalled Max Payne 3, which by the way, if you want to try to play Max Payne 3 in 2017, it's really hard because you have to like go in and manually reinstall Rockstar Social Club and do all that. I had to jump through some hoops, but I did finally get it running, and I'm like, I mostly want to play that again to see if like I was a teen when Max Payne 3 happened. I don't remember if it was good or not. I want to like play it again and see if it was as good as I remember. But like really, the one thing I do remember about Max Payne 3 is, as cool as it was, it didn't feel like Remedy's Max Payne.
No,
It
Right.
was such a specific
Yeah,
vibe to that.
absolutely.
I mean, they were prototyping Michael shooting mechanic for 5.
Yeah.
Like that's what they do, in the same way you see like the fighting and traversal for warriors is like early version of GTA 4. Like it's weird how they kind of test
Yeah.
that stuff out.
So are there any developers though who are like, you feel like they're stuck under the weight of some enormous franchise that you want to get them out from under? Like,
We were just talking about this. Who's the other indie dev that's doing something like really huge that started out with something smaller? God, I'm trying to remember this.
I mean, I think in general, like the bigger and better is like with the trajectory that happens with most franchises, and I think a lot of stuff does get lost in the process here and there. Like I love Mario 64; it's probably my favorite 3D Mario, and I think that like I don't really want like a game 5 times bigger than that. I think there's something great about that size,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Same with like Assassin's Creed games. I think have just gotten to the point where like you start one up, you open up the map, and it's like, oh God, I have a million things to do.
A lot of clutter.
Yeah, it's just like icons, and they give you busy work because they want you to feel like you got your $60 worth. But I'd be totally okay with half as many things, half the size of a city.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same about Far Cry, so maybe it's just a Ubisoft thing. But I don't know. This is a really tough question. Nothing
Yeah.
is coming to mind for me.
I wonder if how developers feel about it. Like I obviously we have no way of taking the temperature of what things are like at Hello Games right now, but I'm curious if like they seem pretty committed to updating No Man's Sky. I wonder if on a personal level, is that what they want to be doing, or do they want to make like these colorful, super fun, super tight? Because Joe Danger is just like a small. It feels like a Sega Genesis game.
Yeah,
like
totally.
I've been a Hello Games fan since like 2009 for that reason, and I kind of want them to. That's their wheelhouse for me. I want to see what they would make in that.
Yeah.
But
It's weird with something like that though, because then do you go like from the makers of No Man's Sky?
yeah, I totally wonder what they. I'll be interested to see how they do that for their next game.
Yeah.
Whatever their next game.
Me
is.
too. I would.
I'd like to see
I
them put Joe Danger in No Man's Sky. You just ride a dirt bike around.
I'm actually amazed they didn't
Giraffes.
do anything like that.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
There must be some planet out there that's just his head. It's just Joe's head.
Start
It's like
looking.
a stubble field
Real
that
weird.
takes up like a third of it.
Yeah. So let's wrap things up here. Before we go, Nick, where can people find you once again?
You can find me on youtube.com/Polygon for good videos and youtube.com/Babylonian for bad videos.
You've done some good and bad ones on both, I think.
Yeah, the lights
Really
are flickering.
It's really
it's,
weird.
It's like we have
because of
a
it.
thunderstorm in here.
Oh yeah, it is pretty messed up out there in San Francisco this week. A lot of rain. But yeah, I am Babylonian on every website like Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, and I do a podcast called Cool Games Inc. with Griffin McElroy, where people submit really stupid ideas for video games to us, and we kind of design them as though they were real.
I love that
really
idea.
wanna
That's
come
such
on
an.
that
I
that's such an
should
awesome
have
thing.
all y'all on it, just like back to back to back.
Yeah, let's do it.
Just batch record.
Let's do it, man. We love your work. We're glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
I think you're fine.
Love to
Thanks
have
for
y'all
coming by
on.
on this crappy weather. Of course, you can find us all on Twitter. You are, like you said, Babylonian. I'm Max Scoville. Alana is Charl Anazard, and Brian, your Agent Bizzle.
Yep.
We'll be back next week with more of this show that we do, which is Beyond. Is
Beyond.
there anything else I'm supposed to say? I forget.
No, I think you did really
Is
good.
that it?
Oh,
All
we're,
right.
we're giving away an entire
Supply
RV full of birds.
RV full of birds.
Yeah.
If you find it and you have enough special coins, it's all yours.
I guess also check out the YouTube channel on youtube.com/IGN
Yes.
Beyond and the
you're such a
Facebook
shill.
page,
Good God.
which is facebook.com/group/
I mentioned that one.
No, that was
Yeah.
exactly what we forgot. Oh,
Yeah.
that-
Also, the apps.
You're glad you're here.
The apps are out there.
Y'all got apps?
Yep.
We have hella
We've got lots of
apps.
apps.
Whoa.
And that's the end of the show.